Hello there. Good morning, afternoon, morning. Just today thinking about this, which is the Single Girls calendar by Erin Green, and it's lovely. It's a beautiful book. I was kind of expecting a more traditional chick litty sort of stuff, but it's actually quite gritty. It covers some quite tricky subjects. Somebody dies, and I will not ashamed to say that I may have had a tear in my eye when that happened. It's got some. It has a couple of holes. I would have liked a little bit more. There were a few things I didn't quite understand what had happened. That may be because it's part of a series. But it was great to read. I liked the characters. I liked the central single girl that we follow. I enjoyed her tenacity and her gumption. She's got a lot of. She's got a great character. I liked her very much. I found her relationship with her parents a bit odd, and again, perhaps there was more going on there than I realised. And then obviously she becomes acquainted with, I won't tell you how, she becomes acquainted with this group of guys who are all sort of equally awful and wonderful, and they all have, stories of their own that we find out about. Again, there are a few things I'd like to have known more about, and I still have a few questions at the end about some of them. But I loved it. I loved the very gentle roll of the story. It all happened in a completely believable and flowing way. There was no points where I was bored or wonder what would happen. None of it seemed too far-fetched, although it is quite an extraordinary story on some levels. It was very beautiful. The relationships were very beautiful. I liked how they sort of formed and normed and stormed, and there was a lot of finding oneself in the book. A lot of the characters are sort of on their own personal mission and have stuff going on, and I liked that. I even liked her boss at work. It was a really weird character, and in it a tiny bit, but I sort of warmed to them. And again, I quite like to know more about them and their background. So there's lots of warmth in the book. There's lots of love in the book. There's lots of dealing with conflict. So, when someone betrays you, when someone does something awful, how do you recover from that? Do you allow them back into your life, or do you draw that line and say that, that there are consequences to your actions? And I always find that, from my background in relationships and working with relationships, I always find that a really interesting question. There's no rights and wrongs. There's how you want to do it, and there's how you want to manage your relationships. But I'm kind of glad she made the choices that she did. It went to the wire. I was not entirely sure which way the story would go, and I like that about a book. I like to know there will be a happy ending. I prefer to start knowing that something joyous will come at the end, but I didn't know in this book at what point that would happen. The only downside for me was that the end did seem a bit rushed. So in sort of, the last few pages, we got all the endings, as it were. And again, I would have liked a bit more. I would have liked a slightly longer book with slightly more explanation of everyone's situations. But that's because I'm greedy. So more for me. I would definitely read Erin Green again. I think she wrote that beautifully. And as I was reading it, it's one of those books, sometimes this happens, as you're reading it, the visuals are so strong that you kind of think you're almost watching it as a film or a TV miniseries in your head. And this was one of those. This would make a brilliant 4-part drama or whatever, because the characters are so rich, and the visuals are quite strong. So yes, good, definitely read it.